RAs and campus cops. What's the wildest thing you've ever caught a college freshman doing? I have two really memorable RA experiences. Purdue, late 90s. The first is a really terrible one. I was an RA at the same time as Jay Severson. Jay was shot and killed by a resident that was a big drug dealer. It shook Purdue heavily, but especially the RA. We were actually called counselors, community. The other, me specifically, one was a freshman who had a father that was super hard on him. One night, I came back to the dorm and he's in the hall with a bottle of Jack, just hammered. Purdue dorms are dry, but I told him to just get rid of it and go to bed. 5 minutes later, he walks to my room with the bottle, and I told him I have to write this up now. I never wrote people up. He then just breaks down. Snot tears break down. He was planning to unalive himself that night, so I spent the next 2 hours talking to him and convinced him to see someone professional the next morning. He passed out in my room, and in the morning, he called a real professional and began therapy. I didn't write him up for alcohol. Next story. I used to catch people playing possum all the time. Basically, a bunch of students would climb a tree and drink until they started falling out. Last person in the tree wins. Found a couple idiots having lightsaber fights once. They'd unscrewed the fluorescent tubes and were having sword fights with them. One time, a whole floor got scabies and were running back and forth from the laundry room, washing every single item of clothing and linen they had. One resident was hiding a homeless person in the TV room. Residents were welcome to have friends on site, and they were also welcome to stay in the TV room at the rec center after lockup. They just had to pull the door closed after themselves when they left. This guy was staying in the TV room with his homeless friend until the RAs finished their rounds, locking him in the TV room, going back and sleeping in his own room, and then waking up early to go back to the TV room before the RAs came around in the morning, unlocking everything again. I woke up around midnight one night because people were firing Roman candles at one of the buildings. We were having problems with some local kids who kept playing pranks on the residents, and naturally I assumed it was them. So I called campus security to deal with it, and they ended up rounding up my own residents. After I gave them all write-ups, one of them asked me why I didn't tell them beforehand that they weren't allowed to set fireworks off on campus. Not my hall, but still pretty memorable. The RAs from one of the other residences on campus came to us with one of their problems. They kept finding human feces outside one of their buildings and assumed it was one of our residents playing pranks on them. Completely reasonable. We had a weird group that year. I told him that I would keep an ear out. When it kept happening, one of their RAs had a stake out and saw the feces being dropped out of one of the windows. Turns out the resident was setting toilet paper down on his bedroom floor, crapping on it, and then dropping it out the window because he didn't want to use the hall's bathrooms. On the final night in the halls, I found a room of people, each pouring a beer directly into the carpet for their friends who had left uni before the semester finished. Best 2 years of my life. Next story. RA a long time ago. Group of freshmen in a 4-man suite got permission for a pet somehow from the leasing office. They didn't specify that it was a effing pig. The smell was unbelievable. That lasted a couple of weeks until the dean of students finally gave me and the housing office the power to threaten expulsion. And that is why, in contracts and fine print, you have to specify what kind of pet you are allowing on your premises. Because pigs, ugh. Next story. RA and campus EMS here. I've had many encounters with drunk and high, etc. freshmen, but I have a couple I'll never forget. One of them was during my first years in RA, living on the 4th floor of my building. I woke up to knocking on my door at around 3 a.m., coupled with the screaming of, "There's people having sex in my bed." Alright, I guess I better not ignore this one. So I head out and see this freshman who reeks of alcohol and stumble toward his room. Plot twist, he doesn't live there, and the two students half-clothed open the door. I send him off and go back to bed to be woken up again 15 minutes later by more knocking. Guess who's back? In one hand, he has a water bottle, and in the other, he has a trimmer in the other hand. Now, I'm 6'4", and he's pretty tiny, so it did not end well when he tried to shave my beard. Ended up tossing him back into his room, onto his bed, and finally got to go to bed. Next story. I was neither of those, but on my floor, my sophomore year, we had freshmen move in. This one guy put blankets all over his floor. No big deal, I see them do this a lot. The carpet is really ugly, and it actually helps a lot with cleaning. You roll up the blanket and shake it off outside and wash it. Anyway, what this kid did was ridiculous. He had no roommate, but he had people over all the time. And whenever he would have people over, they made a mess. Instead of cleaning the blankets, he just stacked more blankets on top of the old dirty ones. This got so bad, and he was so lazy that if he spilled something or had trash like pizza boxes he didn't want to take out, he put another blanket over everything. This obviously started to smell horrible, so he took air spray and sprayed the crap out of his floor, blanket mattress, and room-sized couch. So, since there was stuff in between the layers of blankets, the room was all lumpy and wavy, and it started to rise slowly over the years he piled more blankets. Christmas break came. I told the RA about this, and he went in to check. The blankets from only one semester, he had already bought the floor to about 6 inches off the ground. You had to step up to get into his room. Something had to be done, and he was told to get rid of it or there would be a consequence. I left the building and moved to a closer dorm to the music building for the next semester, so I forgot about it. Come May, I went over to that dorm to pick up a friend to take him back home after graduation. Peeps be moving out of the dorms. I went up to the second floor, and there's the grounds team, using pipe saws and box cutters to cut the dude's now 1-foot thick floor of blankets into squares to get it out of his room. It was grown through with mold, of all colors, trash, smelly stuff, and lots of liquid. It was amazing. Next story. A resident my ex had to deal with. I was an RA dating an RA, LMAO, and she did not want a roommate. She chose to live in a dorm that required roommates. You could pay more to live alone at a different dorm, but I guess she just didn't want to do that. So what does she do? She pees in her bed until her roommate gets so fed up they move to another room. And when someone comes to check the room, she switches the mattresses so hers is clean and it looks like whoever left a pee-soaked mattress. It was a nightmare for the RAs of that building to deal with because our residents' life higher-ups were like, we don't care, you have to check the room, it's a safety requirement. But you literally couldn't walk in there without your eyes watering and gagging within seconds. People are effing crazy. Yeah, this actually reminds me of my first roommate that I had in college. He would piss his bed all the time. Not sure if it was intentional or not, but I was able to get him removed from the premises, and I got that room all to myself for the rest of the year, so... Yeah, this just kind of triggered that memory. Next story. RA here. One Friday night, most of my hall was drinking and preparing to go out. I was quite chill with it all as long as nobody did stupid things or got the police called. I got alerted that the police were being sent up to my floor, but the other side, because of a report that a kid was passed out in the bathroom. I told a couple rooms on my side to close their doors and turn the music off as a precaution. They did. Except 2 guys, Null and Pick, names slightly changed to protect them, decided to go grab a big trash can and wheel it into their room. Of course, just as they enter the room, the police officers get off the elevator and witness it. They immediately assume that whoever was passed out got taken into their room, and the trash can was because puke was going on. My room was right across from them, so I got to witness what happened next. The cops knocked on the door and sidestepped the peephole. After a tense few seconds, the residents open the door. The cops step in and ask what's going on. By this time, I've stepped out to see what was going on. Null says that they were just planning to do some spring cleaning. The cops are suspicious. Cops didn't look amused and said to have a good night. They left. I was chatting with Pick and Null, and they were practically shaking, they were so nervous. I asked why they were so jittery, and Pick points to a solo cup on a shelf full of straight whiskey. Null opens his cabinet, and there are, I'm not kidding, 200 plus empty Four Locos cans. The OGs. I'm standing there with my mouth open, asking them why. He said they were planning to build a pyramid, but decided to scratch that idea. They proceeded to smush all the cans and hide them at the bottom of the trash can. I sometimes wonder how Paul and Nick are doing. Next story. Finally, my thread to shine in. 2 years RA. I was a junior my first year as an RA, and my final year as a senior, 1 semester grad early. Was the floor from hell. Here are my top 5. State police raided our floor after a kid sold meth to an undercover. I had a kid poop on my door in revenge for writing him up for beating up his roommate. I had 2 residents have a coke-off. They held a contest to see who can do the most blow. Both won a trip to the hospital. I had a kid try to MacGyver beer into the building by throwing a rope out the 6th floor window, have a dude at the bottom tie it up and then pull it up. A kid threw a chair through our lobby window because he lost at Mario Kart. But the Mac Daddy of them all, the creme de la creme, was the story of the assault a cop, domestic assault, and threat to seriously injure a roommate. It was my birthday, and I was on duty. My birthday is Halloween. I get a call on the duty phone, and a resident was calling to say they heard weird squeaking sounds next door. Banging is cool, but please be quiet. Fine, it's 3 a.m. and I have nothing better to do. I walk to the room and it smells like hell. Well, I say open up, or I have to open up. A worried girl opens and says this guy and her were trying to hook up. He started fading, puked on himself, then passed out, hit his head, and is now crapping himself. Double F. I now have minors with alcohol and someone with a medical emergency. This is crappy. Okay, phone 911, campus cops, and explain. In rush the medics to take away the poopy kid. Well, Crapstain wakes up from his drunk stupor and starts trying to fight the medics for kidnapping him, and "You can't take me, Obama!" Well, he cracked a cop in the jaw, which led to him getting arrested and sent to a hospital. Triple F. I'm going to have so much paperwork from this. It's now 4 a.m. on my birthday. Shift started the day before my birthday. I watched a couple come up the stairs. Me and the cop see this girl is kind of shaken up, so we keep an eye on her. She says something about going home, and the guy grabs her and slaps her in front of a cop. I know this is not going well, so she books after the guy and takes him in. Because this happened in a dorm, I have to document it too. Not a woe is me, but when it rains it pours situation. To end the night, I walked into the lobby, bleary-eyed and dead tired. The cops joked there's no way you can call us again. You've seen it all. Nope. A resident threw his laptop at a roommate over him taking his ramen for drunk food. This led to him threatening serious harm. If I recall correctly, it was, "I'll rip your effing guts out." Yeah, I called the cops again. That was one of the memorable ones, but I got way more. Edit. Okay, two more nice ones. Knock at the door over a resident dispute. A guy wanted his roommate to leave so he could get intimate. Seems normal enough, except his fully erect chicken was staring me in the face. I remember we did a mid-year review. They did a word graph of how the students felt about the RA. I was notorious for not taking guff and writing you up because rules is rules. They had to censor my word bubble. The top 3 words were chickenhead, a-hole, and mother effer. I think it means I did a good job. I did also have a talk with a chronic self-pleasure. Sticky situation. Tough conversation to rub out, but we got it. Next story. I'll give you 3. We had a bamboo forest near campus. I was on duty once when 2 dudes dragged an entire tree into the main lounge and up the stairs. I asked them, what the F? I asked these 2 guys what the F a lot, to be fair, and they said they were making rafts. I wrote it up, of course, but it wasn't easy to figure out what to write up. I settled on destruction of campus property, since I'm pretty sure you can't swipe an entire bamboo tree. Dude on my floor was having hallway earthquake, shaking top volume, grunting loud sex. Really loud, and it was kinda late, and I'm just sitting there playing my video games, waiting for it to be over, and hoping that I don't have to go knock on his door because, well, why the F would I want to do that for? I mean, it's a noise violation, of course, but I'm hoping everybody can just let it go. Anyways, I get a phone call. If someone is actually complaining about it, I've got to go knock. So I pick up the phone with trepidation, and a floor mate decides to share with me how much he's enjoying the sex noises. Yeah, I don't care if you're my resident, this conversation is over. Click. Last one. This is the first guy again. I'm doing end-of-the-year room inspections. I expect this to go badly. Mr. Bamboo has destroyed thousands of dollars in campus property this year. He shattered a floor-length window in the main lounge and broke every damned light on the 3rd floor while drunk. Every one. So I go in and his room is surprisingly neat and undestroyed, except his desk. It looks like the black version of Slimer pleasured himself all over it. I ask him what on God's green earth is coating his desk. Goo. He would not elaborate. I marked the desk down as destroyed. I sure as hell wasn't cleaning it. Next story. Oh man, this is yeah. So there are a bunch, but the one that tops the list was the smell. Like the time I was almost stabbed, the multi-floor soap fight, the common room sex doll on tour day, the time a student almost stabbed 3 people, the possible study room distillery, the hallway threesome my coworker ran into, the used condom board. None of it was ever as bad as the smell. I was an RA in a fairly quiet building. We had a few troublemakers, but generally it was quiet and calm, and it was decently clean for a crusty old residence building, except for the third floor. Third floor smelled. About a month in, it developed the weird, sickly, sweet reek of rot that would permeate it for the rest of the year. Rot with hints of something else underneath. After a week, we realized it probably wasn't any of the usual issues, like a chicken dinner left sitting in a study room. After 2 weeks, we got tired of waiting. We spent a while trying to figure out the source, sniffing around, keying into rooms, until finally we tracked it to a single room in the corner. So we put in a work order. Finally, maintenance comes, goes through the radiator, and ends up finding a rat skeleton. It had to have been there so long that it was mostly decayed, hence the stench. So, issue resolved, right? Unfortunately not. The smell simply grew. It deepened, grew richer, an oddly musky odor of putrescence filling the floor. Students complained, and we said that we couldn't do anything. But we tried. We looked around, checked the floor, checked common rooms. As the stench grew, we began to try keying into rooms to see if we could find it. By now, duty rounds of 3 were sprints to check for problems, rather than friendly check-ins. So eventually, in our search, we got back to that corner room, and we keyed in. Until the day I die, I will never forget the scent. It forced its way past clenched lips and held breath straight to my tongue, where the iron tang of blood mingled with the rot. One RA stumbled away, gagging, and there it was, the source, sitting on the radiator, in the window, midwinter with the sun full on it and the radiator going full blast underneath it, was a mason jar. Inside the jar was 5 months' worth of used tampons. In the aftermath, we requested that the student clean them time and time again. Since we could not touch the biohazard, we tried to explain that it wasn't sanitary. She did not remove them. She also, at various times, complained about the smell on the floor, apparently not realizing that she was the cause. Edit. We were told by our managers that we weren't allowed to move the jar, as it was private property. Our management was oftentimes ineffective. Next story. Not a RA or a cop, but I went home one weekend and came back while my roommate was out. I had been back for 15 minutes or so when my RA knocked on my door. I opened it up and saw her staring a hole through me and finally said, "We need to talk about what happened this weekend." I asked, "What the F are you talking about?" She said, "Last night was unacceptable, and if it happens again, we'll press charges." I was pretty confused and repeated, "What the F are you talking about? I've been gone all weekend." My roommate apparently got drunk, poorly, tried to sneak in a girl after opposite sex visiting hours were over, 2 a.m., and when the person at the front desk caught him, knocked over a bunch of stuff, poured a bottle of Gatorade on the floor, and told the girl, "Run and don't look back." I laughed, but the RA didn't see the humor. Next story. Okay, so I was only an RA for 1 semester, but my top 2 stories are: one time, 3 of my residents were in an elevator, and 2 of them decided to jump and set off the sensors. So they were trapped in the elevator, and I was on duty, so I had to deal with it. I didn't know what to do, so I called the hall director on duty, who was the repairman. The repairman said he would be there in an hour, so I had to be there, waiting, keeping an eye on the situation. So me and some friends of the people stuck grabbed lawn chairs, snacks, and filled our Yeti cups and tailgated the event. When the hall director on duty showed up, she saw we had it handled and we were enjoying ourselves. So she joined in the fun and started singing "Hello from the Other Side" to the kids in the elevator. The other memorable event was, one night, a couple of my residents bought ghost peppers to try and see who could handle the heat. Well, one kid who was Thai said, "My food is way spicier than this," eats one whole, and starts another when the heat sets in. We had ranch and tortillas ready for people to eat to cool down. After everyone was done eating, me included, we're just hanging out in the lounge. The kid who had been cutting up the peppers went to bed before us, and his room is right next to the lounge. About 5 minutes after he went to bed, we hear him screaming. Apparently, he didn't wash his hands and started pleasuring himself. He was in a lot of pain, so we threw him a bottle of ranch and left the room so he could apply it to his area. Then the rest of us washed our hands very thoroughly. This is funny. This is very funny, with ghost peppers, stuff all over your hands trying to jerk it, and then for the roommates to throw them ranch like that's going to do anything. Amazing. This is very funny. Next story. Not an RA, but freshman year I lived in the second floor of the dorms, and my 3 roommates decided to start playing soccer in the hallways. I didn't know they were playing soccer until I got back from the library around 11:50 p.m. I come up the stairs, and all my roommates were lined up against the wall, and the RA points at me and says, "Oh, since you're here, you're getting written up." I told her I came from the library. I was wearing my backpack and had 2 textbooks in my arm. She didn't buy it, and I got written up. Screw you, Martha. Edit. I had to attend a meeting after I got written up, and after 3 minutes, I was off the hook. My other 3 roommates were not so lucky. Next story. Not an RA, but a first-hand witness. My freshman year of college, I lived in a building with super long hallways and went to school in central PA. The 2 days that were affected by Hurricane Sandy, 2012, I think, and by affected I mean severe rain and higher than normal winds, classes were canceled and we were told not to leave the dorms unless it was an emergency. So what happens when 400 bored college kids are forced to stay indoors? Start a multi-floor jousting tournament. Each contestant had to sit on a skateboard and try to knock their opponent off their skateboard while being pushed at pretty decent speeds. Was definitely one of the best unofficial freshman icebreakers I participated in. Sadly, it got busted not too long after. People started yelling war cries down the hallways. Next story. RA here. Typical story of a freshman girl getting way too drunk, and I escorted her to the hospital with the ambulance. The girl is squirming all over the place, so they ask me to come back to the room to watch her while we wait for the PA on duty. PA finally comes in. The girl is still squirming all over the bed, unresponsive to anything the PA is telling her. Finally, the PA goes to put the needle for the IV in and warns the girl of a slight painful poke. The girl abruptly stops her squirming, looks the PA dead in the eye, and yells, "Do it! You won't!" I couldn't contain my laughter at this moment. I really tried my best. Next story. I'm an RA in an upperclassman dorm, so this event didn't occur with a freshman, but rather a junior. For reference, the hall has apartments instead of typical dorm rooms, so every room has a full kitchen, a living room, 1 or 2 bathrooms, and a private room for each resident. One night during my first semester as an RA, I'm doing a 2 a.m. round on a Friday night when I come across one of my residents in a study room. He gets my attention, tells me that his roommate has a bird in their apartment and that he doesn't want to return to his room until the bird is gone. He tells me that the roommate is letting the bird sleep in his bed and is feeding it Fruit Loops. Obviously, wild animals on the list of prohibited items, so I go knock on the door of the apartment to deal with the situation. As if the situation wasn't going to be weird enough to handle, the resident answers the door in his boxers. I ask him if he has a bird in his room, and his face lights up as he runs to his bedroom to get it. He comes back cradling a small pigeon in his hands, then extends it to me as if the sole purpose of me knocking on his door at 2 a.m. was to pet his newfound companion. I say to him, "I'm sorry, but you can't keep a wild bird in your apartment." My resident tries to explain to me that the bird is sick and that he needs to nurse it back to health. I again explain that wild animals are not allowed in residence halls, and domesticated animals are only allowed if approved through the DRC. My resident gets pissed. He puts the bird on the ground and storms back to his room without a word. I watch the bird run around the kitchen floor for a moment, then call my resident's name to confirm that he has plans on taking the bird back outside. My resident storms back into the kitchen, thankfully with pants on this time, and yells that he's going to, quote, "rip the bird's effing head off because he'll die without me." I try to convince him that there's no need to kill the bird, that it would feel better in its natural environment, and I stick around just long enough to ensure the bird was removed from the building. There were no complaints of a dead, headless bird outside the building, so thankfully I don't think he followed through with his plan. Next story. After 4 years as student security and 3 as an RA, I had a lot of memorable moments, but I'll share one of the more innocent ones. Setting: tiny private Catholic college in rural Indiana during freshman week. The only people on campus were the RAs, freshman leaders, upperclassmen who were introducing freshmen to the campus, and the freshmen. We have the usual dorm meeting where the other RAs and I try to explain the rules of the dorms. Being a Catholic school, one of the rules was no members of the opposite sex in the dorm after quiet hours start, except in 1 or 2 specific lounges per dorm. It wasn't a rule that any of the RAs were hardasses about, but we were obligated to list it as a rule because our supervisors and campus security did enforce it. That night, I go out to a bar with a friend that was celebrating her 21st birthday. Her boyfriend and roommate both drove in an hour or two away to help celebrate. A couple hours into the evening, the roommate and boyfriend both realize that they're both planning to spend the night in birthday girl's room, and neither are comfortable with both of them staying there. Being a bro, I tell my roommate she can stay in my room and I'll crash on the couch I have. The next morning, bright and early, I walk the roommate to the door of my dorm. To do so, I have to walk by the lounge mentioned earlier, and one of my freshmen is sitting there. This kid has been on campus 3 or 4 days at this point, and he's already gotten the nickname Kid Pious due to wearing exclusively shirts from his church and church camps. He and I make eye contact. He shifts his eyes to a girl walking out of my dorm at 7 a.m., and I say, "You saw nothing." He says, "Absolutely nothing." And we all go about our days. Even several years later, after me graduating, him being an RA, then him graduating, we'd see each other at various events on campus as we'd come back. He'd smile, say, "I still saw nothing," and we'd both nod knowingly. Next story. Not an RA, but when I was a freshman, I lived in the dorms as part of a 10-person suite, 5 double rooms. Highlights include one suite mate getting charged with second-degree assault when he swung on his roommate, requiring me and my roommate to subdue him until the police arrived. At one point, each of all 5 rooms had at least one drug dealer living there, giving birth to our suite's nickname as the pharmacy. When my roommate moved out to be closer to the people he sold pot to, I got a replacement roommate who moved in on a night I was away. I came back to the dorm to find out he got arrested for SA on his very first night. Only met the kid once, when he was escorted back to the building by police to gather his possessions before his arraignment. Suitemate jumped from his third-story balcony to a tree about 6 feet away and slid down it like a fire station pole. There's more, but a lot of it is a blur due to my own excessive drug abuse. Living in that suite led to me needing to really reconstruct academics in the following year. Next story. Campus security had a freshman girl scream at me that I was a white supremacist, racist, using police brutality, among some other expletives. Apparently, politely asking someone to keep their voice down on the phone at 3 a.m. on a weeknight is racist. Yes, she happened to be black. No, I'm not a goddamn racist. You're on the first floor, and the noise complaint came from a resident on the second floor. Next story. I was an RA for 2 years, but one story sticks out of my head above all others. There is an EDM concert happening at Red Rocks, this outdoor amphitheater in Denver. I knew all kinds of people were going. Obviously, there would be a lot of chemical entertainment complementing the magical MacBook spacebar musicians and their killer lasers. I was pulling a 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. shift at the front desk of the dorm that night. It was a Friday, so even before the concert ended, I was graced with countless drunk 18-year-olds trying their hardest to act sober as they bobble to the elevator. Always a good time. I never really cared about anybody who wasn't passed out or just annoyingly loud. I just did homework and occasionally called an ambulance. Eventually, rave whores and neon bros started filtering through the doors. Most didn't act drunk, just stared wide-eyed straight forward and walked like the painful constipation was kicking in. The wave died down after maybe 20 minutes and my shift got pretty quiet. Then she came, the girl I can't stop thinking about. She was moderately rotund, though her apparel was that of malnourished Taiwanese street hooker who just finished a color run. Her eyes were glazed like the donuts of her soon-to-be state-sponsored babysitters. Her walk was haphazard, quick, and clearly on manual. She had hair cemented to her now melting mask of makeup, and lipstick smeared over her gaping maw. Hers was a night of intense rhythmic jostling and mystery substance inhaling. I did not know her, but in that moment, I felt as if I had experienced this trip with her. Not a great trip, I must say. She stared at me for a moment, a slight panic in her eye as an authority was spotted, and some part of her knew that she did not look in normal sorts. But she powered on with determination and entered the elevator quite self-assured I was none the wiser to her predicament. I could see her face as she stood in the box that relieved her so often from the stairs. She was proud. She had made it home, and no one had to know what debauchery she had gotten up to. The doors began closing, and she smirked. But she had not pushed a button. The elevator did not, in fact, elevate. It waited with the patience only a machine can afford us. I wonder what her experience in there was like. Was she aware of how long it was before the doors opened? I was rather entertained and watched closely, waiting for her to realize her oversight and choose her floor, or just a floor. But she didn't. Some time passed. Eventually, some other young delinquents of the night came through the lobby. They headed for the elevator that concealed this magnificent woman. Upon requesting a lift, the already present elevator sprung open its doors, from which the now frustrated girl emerged with a little less fire in her eyes. The others parted so she could exit, and she certainly tried. Upon dragging her shoes to escape her preposterously long lift ride, she caught a toe in the crack. Never has a human fell with less grace. It was a live reenactment of Patrick from the SpongeBob movie. Her entire weight followed her down onto her face and belly. Not a hand, nor elbow, nor knee thrust forward to catch her. An audible whomp filled the lobby. A red spurt flew from her face in a rather Tarantino display of bodily fluids. I could not help but laugh. The others jumped. One gave out a little yelp, but in fear of being caught intoxicated, they shuffled onto the elevator. They managed to push a button, so it left. She, of course, stayed, planted on the ground, arms at her side, like she was planking for internet fame. Not a sound, either. No grunts of pain. It was rather surreal. I felt like I just watched a Three Stooges bit. Eventually, I realized I was the one with the job to do, and the spectacle would have to wait till someone saw to her. I called the other RA on duty, and I went over to get her off the floor. Her nose was bleeding pretty well. I managed to haul her into a nice chair near the elevator. Her consciousness had left with the lift. The other RA came pajama-clad, and we called for an ambulance, and then just stared at this now asleep mess of a human. Not a word was shared, but I felt a deep connection with her, both half asleep trying to do right for a heavily drugged and confused college girl. When the EMTs arrived, they had quite a few questions, some of which I could answer. Some policemen arrived shortly after. They asked me about what had happened, and laughed with me as I regaled her short but exciting adventure in my lobby. She did awake, and was rather mad at all of us, though her words were not doing a great job of communicating why. To my knowledge, she was taken to a nice clean room to sober up. I always remembered her. I always recognized her as she walked through my lobby the rest of the year, though I'm quite certain she did not recognize me. To her, I was just some RA, but to me, she was the pinnacle of college experimentation. A reminder of appreciating those who accompany my intoxicated wreck of a self, and a reminder of how funny life tends to be from the third person. Next story. The shameless self-pleasurer. 1. He would beat his meat with his roommate in the room, would simply climb up into his lofted bed, crank that adult content, without headphones, what a monster, and choke the chicken. To make things worse, he couldn't be bothered to finish in a tissue. He would finish on the infamous blue plastic mattress underneath his sheets and leave it there. 2. He would buff his banana while sitting at his desk, arrive at completion, and leave his gunk in the keyboard tray. He apparently had an aversion to self-pleasure juicing in acceptable locations. 3. Our hall had a pumpkin carving program for Halloween, and instead of carving a jack-o'-lantern, he carved a hole to stick his chicken in. According to his roommate, this poor pumpkin was essayed on many different occasions. 4. The culmination of his wacky adventures ended with him tooting his horn with the door open to the hallway. His floormate took one look, threw up in the hallway, and then attempted to beat the crap out of him. Eventually, the kid was moved. His desk and mattress were quite literally condemned. I've been an RA for 4 years and have many an amusing story, but this is one I will never forget. Next story. Not an RA or a cop. Last year, my school decided to set up a beehive research setup on a recently closed porch to one of the dining halls. This setup wasn't protected at all from stupid students. One night, a few smart people decided to go up to the beehives, take one, and throw it into a nearby dorm's elevator. They then proceeded to press every button so that the elevator would stop on every floor of the building. Whole damn building had to be evacuated. Said people were expelled. Next story. Had a freshman attempt self-unaliving. That wasn't fun. It was my second day. I hadn't even done training yet. Called 911 and administered CPR until another RA got an AED. Had a freshman attempt to essay a girl on the floor below me. I started doing my rounds and I heard screaming. I literally kicked in the door and shouted, "Get on the effing ground!" because it was the only thing that came to my brain. She had no clothes on, and I gave her my jacket, and she hid in my room. We ended up being pretty close friends. That guy's roommate was accused of theft of his roommate's shoes, which in the room search, I found a gun belonging to the SAer. The roommate got arrested on other unrelated drug charges. Had a freshman soccer girl always answer her door in her underwear. She was so effing hot. We ended up banging on a study abroad trip. But the most memorable event of all of them had a resident have an anxiety attack while super drunk. He tore through his door because it was locked and he just wanted to hide. But it wasn't his room, and the girls pepper sprayed him, which just scared him more, and we ended up running straight through a glass door and cutting himself pretty badly. We got him to an ambulance and he came out all right. For some reason, the worst crap happened when I was on duty. For the most part, though, it was just handling lockouts at 2 a.m. Next story. I was once notified by one of my residents that her mattress had been misplaced and she wanted to know if she would be charged for it or if she was good. I told her she would most certainly be charged for it, and then, mysteriously, the mattress reappeared a week before summer closing. I heard through the paper-thin door of her room later that it had been at a frat house for a while, and I dread the thought of what happened to it. Yeah, situations like this, you gotta ask yourself, is it really worth getting that mattress back? Like, is anyone ever gonna want to sleep on that thing again? Next story. I dealt with a crap ghost once. RA for 1 year. In my area, there were a handful of RAs, plus our RD, who shared a group chat so we could ask questions as we went about our business. One day, I'm checking my chats and found this exchange between another RA and our RD. RA says, "Hey RD, what's the policy on getting an exorcism done in the res halls?" And the RD says, what do you mean?" RA goes, "Two of my residents want an exorcism done in their res hall. What happened was this. These two students would occasionally go use the bathroom and find crap in their toilet, but neither of them were the ones who took the crap. So, the only logical explanation was that there was a crap ghost in their res hall whose only purpose was to crap in their toilet and not flush. Not that, the building was hella old and probably didn't have plumbing as great as it did 50 to 60 years ago. This ghost could have flung crap across the room, possessed people, but nah, its sole purpose was to crap in toilets." Next story. I went to a small liberal arts school in the town of Nowhere, Tennessee, in mountains and forest. You could store your hunting rifle or bow at a police station, and during certain times of the year, hunt on the larger 13,000-acre campus. One of the infamous boys' dorms layout was 2 doubles connected by a bathroom. I wasn't the RA for this dorm, but I heard about it in one of the larger meetings. Apparently, the head RA received a complaint because one guy's suite mate had shot and killed a deer and hung it in the shower so he could skin and butcher it. Blood was everywhere. Next story. I dated RA, which was way against the rules, but it was on the sly. Anyhow, long story short, a friend on my floor tells me she's banging a prof. I tell my RA girlfriend because I'm concerned and naive and all that, and she tells me a different girl on the floor is also banging that same prof and had just disclosed it to her a couple of days prior. In the end, I don't know how many frosh this prof must have been banging overall, but she did report him, and he wasn't teaching anymore at least. Yeah, I know that, technically college age, they're all adults here, but that's gross. Come on, prof. Next story. Got a duty call from a worried mom one Saturday afternoon. She hadn't heard from her 18-year-old daughter in a few days and wanted someone to check on her. Sure, I said. I go and knock on her door. She's there, just studying, and promises to call her mom. Next day, the student died. She got very sick, called a friend, went to the hospital, and was dead in a matter of hours. I wasn't the last person to see her alive, but I might have been the last to see her healthy. Years later, I can't shake the feeling that her mom had some sort of premonition. Next story. Neither RA or cop, but here's a fun one. On our floor, we had this kid who would ask questions about everything. Everything. But not just how or why stuff. Things like, should I do this paper or that one first? Blue or black pen? Do they care about cursive? What should I get for dinner? What time should I set my alarm? Should I have a backup alarm? Should my clock or phone be the primary alarm? Which alarm sound should I use? Everything. I realize some of my examples are pretty reasonable things on their own, but I want to say half of what this kid said was having other people make decisions for him. Anyways, people go out one night, and he gets plastered. Him and a few others are making their way back to the dorms and have to pass the light night security desk. Meanwhile, I'm up in my room getting a craving for a candy bar, so I hop into the elevator. They sign in, everything is good. They've gotten away with their drunkenness. Then he sees a couple cops. He walks up to them and asks, "Am I too drunk right now? Will I be allowed back to my room?" And then a torrent of puke issued forth from his mouth. And what a flood that was released. As the elevator doors opened up, I just watched this wave of vomit roll across the whole lobby. It was a lot of beer, and with no carpet to absorb it, it easily covered a 20-foot radius, cutting me off from the vending machines. But after seeing that, I really didn't want those M&Ms anymore. Next story. Last weekend of my senior year, I'm packing up everything to send home after graduation and get a call on my room phone. One of my residents was so drunk at a frat party that his friends brought him back to the dorm, but he stopped in the middle of a road and tried to punch cars as they drove past. Cops, not campus security, the town cops, picked him up and brought them all back to the dorm. I wasn't even mad he was that stupid, just impressed. Another guy was so drunk he was running away from the RA on duty and jumped off the second floor balcony, breaking his leg pretty badly, homecoming weekend that year. Next story. Not an RA or police, but there was this person with a panini maker who made and sold paninis on campus. Let's call him Panini Steve. But then he got in trouble for it, because apparently you need a license or something to sell food on campus. So now he's Toilet Paper Steve. The rolls cost $4, but they come with a free panini. If I was a college student with this guy, I would definitely be hitting him up for that toilet paper and the free panini. I mean, it's a struggle. It's a struggle getting through college. Next story. I have a couple. Resident was giving another resident a BJ. He says he's going to finish, ends up peeing in her mouth. She doesn't spit it out immediately, opting to instead run down 2 flights of stairs, outside, and onto the lawn to spit it out. Everyone knew. She was pretty chill about it. Same summer, boy versus girls pranks in the bathroom. Girls turned it up a notch and took a bunch of pads, tampons, and ketchup and went ham in the boys' bathroom. It was all fun, except for one very shy boy who made it very uncomfortable and complained to me. Last, as a freshman orientation leader, we have like a serious time when the new students can get things off their chest, talk about stresses, things they're scared about going into college, or the weekend in general. Most kids often talk about being excited, having a good weekend, being discriminated against, coming out, etc. Generally manageable topics. One kid ends up confessing that he's seriously depressed and would actually beat both of his parents. No amount of training prepares you for that. Utter silence for literally 3 to 5 minutes. Luckily, one of my fellow staffers found something extremely caring and comforting to say. Don't remember what she said, but I was just glad that someone was talking. Next story. Obligatory, not an RA/campus cops, but story. My ex was walking me back to my car super late one night when we had a fun encounter with the campus cops. My university has a few parking structures, and I had a night pass for mine at the time. Good until about 6 a.m. for that term. I was parked about halfway up the structure, 4th floor or so, and we were standing in front of my car saying goodbye when a campus cop car comes roaring up towards us. Dude shoots past us, slams on the brakes, pulls a Fast and Furious style U-turn, and slams to a stop next to us, tires making this horrendous screech the entire time. The cop driving leaps out of the car, hands on his gun, and bells, "What are you doing?" My ex and I traded looks, and I just kind of deadpanned. It's 3 a.m. My boyfriend's walking me to my car. Then I patted my car. The cop immediately deflates. He looks at the other cop for a moment, and then says that there is a report of someone dealing drugs on the roof of the parking structure. He left it off at that, and seemed to want an answer. So I said, "Okay, but this is the 4th floor." Dude goes, yeah. Did you guys see anyone leave or anything?" And then slunk back to his car when I said no. The car does a much more careful U-turn and continues up to the roof. Wasn't sure if it was the same guy, but those idiots went on to shoot a guy this year, and I can't say I'm surprised. Those campus cops were horribly untrained and way too interested in playing hero. Next story. Former RA here. I have 2. Same group of guys who regularly congregated in the room above mine. It was a 2-story townhouse-style dorm. 2:30 a.m.-ish in the morning, I'm woken up by loud yelling and cheering, accompanied by what sounds like someone attempting to smash a hole through my ceiling with a sledgehammer. I storm upstairs a bit scared of what I might find. It was six completely sober 18-year-olds cheering and their angrily Boston Irish Catholic friend as he danced a jig in steel-toe work boots. It was too ridiculous to even be mad. I told them to shut up and went back to bed. 2. One night I was hanging out with the guys and we were watching something on TV. One of the owners of the room went to bed while everyone was still hanging out in his room. Fast forward like 40 minutes. He sits straight up in his lofted bed, lets out a long, high-pitched giggle and shouts, "It's a titty!" then passes back out. I hope I made their freshman year as fun as they made my senior year. Next story. I was a RA back in college, year 2008 through 2010 in PA. My freshman year, we had a pudding eating contest, and all the participants got so sick that there was vomit all in the hallways leading towards the bathroom and in multiple trash cans in the hallways that were left over the weekend. Custodians came back on Monday to clean from the hell over the weekends. I think the contest itself was put on YouTube. My first year, my buddy came back drunk and was making his way back to his room after a frat party. He was so wasted, he thought the radiator was the bathroom and sat down on top of it and pissed on it. He took his pants off before he sat down. My second year as a RA, there is a set of Guido Jersey Shore type douchebags who got drunk one night and ripped the sink out of the boys' communal bathroom, like completely off the wall. Drunk strength amazes me. Had another person unscrew the shower drains in the same bathroom and crap in the hole, but then screwed the drain cover back on. There are 3 men's bathrooms in the whole dorm. I do not know why this one was so popular for destruction. One time, there was this girl who was hooking up with one of the residents in the hall, but she was very loud, so all of his hallmates crowded around the door awaiting her to leave. When she opened the door, they all proceeded to give roaring applause and follow her out of the dorm. Some guys even put trash cans in the middle of the hallways so she'd have to climb over them. My senior year, I had to help find and wrangle an escaped and illegal tarantula back into its cage. It still haunts me. I hate spiders. Next story. So, this isn't one of the crazy stories about drunken freshmen. It's quite sad, but it's definitely the most memorable. I was an RA for first-year students and get a text from a fellow RA asking if we can talk about one of my residents. I find out that said resident had told their parents that they were transitioning, and the parents did not take it very well. In a matter of days, the parents forced them to remove their names from all the residents' documents. Financial aid, guardians, emergency contact, etc. They disowned my resident and were sending him really aggressive messages that were really mean. I talked with the resident, and they're incredibly sweet. We talked about their options and decided it was best for them to move out as they did not feel safe with their parents knowing where they lived. I helped them push through the process, and they were out within a few hours, and they moved into a gender-inclusive dorm. I'm glad to see my resident a little more relaxed, and I believe the entire situation was over. 2 days later, I received a knock on my door. It woke me up as it was Sunday morning, and I opened the door to see a man and a woman in their 40s. They mentioned that they're my resident's parents and that they want to know where their son is. I asked them to enter my room, as I did not want to make a scene in the middle of the floor. They attempted to be sweet and claimed they just wanted to make sure they were okay. I proceed to tell them that they're currently trespassing on government property, and if they don't leave within the next few seconds, I'll be calling the police to have them escorted out. They try to argue, but I restate what I said sternly, and they understand I'm not playing around. As they leave, their true intention comes out, and they say, "Make sure to tell the resident we came to get his brother's iPhone from him. It doesn't belong to him," in a really rude and harsh tone. I was shocked. Safe to say, I never told the resident his parents came for a visit. TLDR, resident got disowned for transitioning. A-hole parents came to force resident to give back iPhone. Update on resident. I see them around campus and they seem a lot happier now. They're incredibly strong and handled this situation better than I could have imagined. Next story. Not a freshman story, but too good not to tell. A guy in my complex had a 21st birthday party that got super loud. Had to key in along with campus PD because the neighbors called them first. Cops proceeded to check IDs, and the birthday jackass drunkenly wraps his ID in a $20 bill and tells the officer to check with Samuel L. Jackson. Turns out he was so drunk he'd forgotten he was 21 and thought bribing campus PD was a good idea. The cop frog marched him outside, had a come to Jesus moment with him, gave him back his ID and the money, wished him a happy birthday, and told him to keep it down. Next story. College RA here. My hall and I had a prank war. Them versus me, of course. It began with me returning to class from one day and feeling that someone messed with my shoes. We have a pretty intense honor system, so everyone leaves doors open. I realized that all of my left shoes were missing. Instantly had a feeling it was one of my residents and texted him a "you know I am texting you." He replied, "Everything all right?" We had a pretty lengthy conversation of him sending puns related to the missing shoes. Found out they were hidden in my room all along. I had to get him back, so I end up turning his entire room upside down. The desk, the chair, you get the idea. It's quiet for a week. Then I return home one day and notice that my awfully bland bed has turned into a pink-covered, stuffed animal sanctuary. Come to find out that they literally switched my bed with a girl resident's bed on a different floor. Not to get sentimental on a post like this, but I genuinely miss that hall a lot, while loving the one I'm currently part of this year. Next story. Not an RA, but freshman year I had a floor that wasn't the most well-liked. I don't think the 2 exit signs on our hallway survived any weekends during the year. The problem was that we were in the middle of a residence hall, so guys from other wings would come and just knock down our exit signs, and of course we were blamed for it. My room was also next to the bathroom, where I'll never forget a maintenance guy finding more than 150 beer cans in the ceiling of our showers, with him yelling, "What the hell?" and apparently getting hit in the head with multiple cans. We got sat down and lectured, saying we would be charged for the beer cans and the exit signs because we couldn't prove it wasn't us. I'm a senior now at a different school, and I still haven't gotten that bill for those exit signs and beer cans, so shrug. Next story. I was an RA in California right after pot was legalized for rec use. This story is one of my RA's friend's stories, but it's too good to pass up. She was on call and got a complaint about noise, so she went to investigate. When she got to the room, she noticed some weed on the table and had to write the resident up. Pot isn't allowed on college campuses that receive federal funding. As she steps in the room to get started on the paperwork, she smells a much stronger scent of weed than what the little bit on the table could possibly produce. So she asks the resident if there's more. The resident very casually goes into their closet and pulls out one of those giant black trash bags full to the brim with weed. Literal pounds of weed. My friend lets the student know that she can't have weed on campus, and even if she could, that bag was well beyond the legal amount a person could possess at any given time. The student said, "Oh, I thought since my parents grew it, I could keep as much of it as I wanted," and then asked my friend if, instead of confiscating it, she'd let them ship the giant bag of weed back home to her parents. That student was later kicked out of the dorms for setting off the fire alarm too many times by smoking in her room. Edit. We also had a student catch a wild squirrel and try to domesticate it in her room. She ended up calling us distraught when it broke loose in the building. Next story. Probably when I was the backup RA one night and my RHD, resident hall director, boss of the RAs, messages all the RAs on my team something like, "Come to room so-and-so now," with no other details. I run down the stairs as fast as I can, and when I get there, my RHD, another RHD, my RA team, cops, and medics are all in the hall outside one room. I recognize which room it is and who lives there. 2 super nice guys, and I see one of the residents that lives there talking to a cop and in tears. I could hear him explaining that him and his roommate were each in their respective bed with headphones on doing their thing. The other roommate gets up to do something, but suddenly falls over. He hits his head on the dresser on the way down and isn't waking up. The roommate started freaking out and got someone in the hallway to get the RHD and call the cops. I had gotten there at least 10 minutes after it all started, and the resident was still unconscious. He was breathing, but the medics were trying everything to get him responsive again. They eventually took him out on a stretcher to a hospital. The RA stayed with the roommate for a while because he was really scared and upset, but he decided to go to the hospital as well, so him and a few residents left. A little while later, another message came from my RHD saying she wanted to talk to the team. We meet outside the room and she informs us that the resident passed away at the hospital. He never woke up. I attended his funeral since I genuinely loved the guy. He was one of the sweetest and funniest people I met as an RA. Always took time out of his day to talk to someone and make them smile. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of his mother screaming at God asking why he took her baby. R.I.P. Anthony, you really were a ray of sunshine. Next story. Wow, my RAs were way different. At most, they were sophomores, only did it for 1 year, and partied with us. Practically no one lived on campus after sophomore year. My best freshman story is about a guy who was down the hall from me. He took too much acid at a bonfire party, stripped down naked, and proceeded to run across campus. Apparently, he darted out in front of a car and was hit. The driver got out of his car to see if he was alright, and the guy punches the driver and steals his car. He then drove it into a tree 100 or so yards away. Edit. My RAs, being friends at the time, did let me know later they actually did take their job seriously. Next story. I was an RA in college, and there were a lot of pretty ridiculous nights, but one in particular stands out. Freshman 1 sleeps with Freshman 2's girlfriend. Freshman 2 breaks down Freshman 1's door and stabs him 3 times with a screwdriver. Me, the RA, responds to ruckus on floor. Freshman 3, 50, try to cover Freshman 2. Next story. It was a couple months into my first year as an RA, and I'd had some stuff come up, but nothing huge to that point. Mostly just noise complaints and weed bus. So I'm headed back to my room after a pretty long day of classes and band rehearsal. I wasn't on duty. I look down the hall and see the RA who was on duty standing in the door of a room. I figured it was a noise complaint or something. At the end of the same hall, I see a group of residents that I was friendly with in the lounge watching TV, so I decide to go pop in and say hi. So I get to the lounge and they start asking me what's going on in the room where the RA on duty is. So now it seems like a bigger issue, so I go to check. As I'm walking out, the other RA grabs my arm and gives me a wide-eyed expression. Crap. So I've got to stay and help. So I come to find out the resident is diabetic and having some sort of low blood sugar episode. He's freaking out and stumbling and is hard to even communicate with. His friends who were hanging out with him grab the other RA out of the hallway because they didn't know what to do. As we're standing there, one of the friends admits the resident is also drunk. They'd shared a fifth of vodka between the 4 of them while hanging out. This is a problem because it's a dry hall and the guy is below the legal age. We notice an empty New Amsterdam bottle on the desk, and my coworker asks him what it is. The drunk resident, probably thinking he was slick as crap, moves the bottle to the floor under the desk and pretends it's not there. There was some other chatting. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the drunk guy basically collapsed. So at this point, we realize we need to get campus security in to get him to a hospital. It's a big building, so the other RA heads down to the lobby to go meet them and take them to the room when they arrive. So now I'm with the drunk resident and his 3 friends. 2 of them are sitting in the hallway just sort of waiting it out. The friend who previously admitted to drinking goes in to try and help the resident get his insulin from the fridge and take it. Resident doesn't like this, I guess, and slaps the guy across the face and cuts his cheek open with the ring he was wearing. He goes to try and get the insulin himself and can't manage to get the door to the fridge open. He's pulling and pulling, but it's from the wrong side, so it won't come off. Finally, with all the strength he can muster, he rips the effing door off the fridge. Stuff goes flying. This is not going well, and I'm doing everything I can think of just to calm the situation. To be honest, I don't even remember if he got his insulin or not. Campus safety arrived after what seemed like an eternity, but was realistically not more than 5 minutes. Drunk resident is absolutely refusing to go with them to the hospital. It slips out he's been doing drugs as well and doesn't want to get arrested. Ugh, this night keeps getting better. Turns out he and his friends had been popping Vicodin that they'd stolen. It finally ended after the officers took down everyone's info. They basically told the guy he could willingly come to the hospital or they'd take him there in handcuffs. He went, and my coworker and I had to write the longest incident report ever.